Hi, I am Don Brennan Aran McKiernan Angui, but nobody knows that except for me. Anyone who actually knows me knows me as Braennan the Misguided. I did not choose that name. That name was foisted upon me over 20 years ago, and it has never gone away. Just to throw my bona fides out there, if I need to, I have been poet laureate of both Meridies and Trimaris. I studied poetry for a bit in college, as much as I could do without changing my major to poetry. I totally fell into poetry accidentally because, I mean, everybody writes poems as a kid, I'm sure, but when I went to college, I really didn't want to do English Comp. And my tests got me out of English Comp 1, but they still wanted me to take English Comp 2, and I really didn't want to. So I was looking for alternatives, and one of the alternatives was a creative writing class for poetry. And I took that instead and proceeded to get utterly hooked until I had basically accidentally minored in poetry. Because like almost every, the electives, yeah, sorry, that's the word I was looking for. I ended up doing poetry classes. So anyway, I love poetry. I love the art, the work, the structure. It all just makes me happy. So anyway, I was asked to teach this poetry class, so let's do it. One of the interesting things about the SCA is it's a really great place for a beginner to dive into an art form. But for the exact same reason that it's really great for a beginner to dive into the art form, it's also a very difficult place sometimes for a beginner to get better at an art form. And both of these two things are true for exactly the same reason, which is phenomenal on its surface. And that is, we applaud effort. And it does not matter how much skill or experience or craftsmanship or anything else goes into that effort, we applaud effort. And that's brilliant. Don't think for a minute that I'm being in any way critical. It's awesome. But it is, like I said, while that makes it very welcoming for people to start into an art form, it can sometimes make it difficult to progress. And that's because everything you do gets applause. Yay, awesome, cool, great. And very seldom, well, let me put this differently. Very seldom until you start playing in the artsci realm, actually going to artsci events, do you actually get constructive criticism, especially when it comes to things that are as personal as poetry. And again, it's awesome. That we applaud effort, that we applaud everyone, that if you've got the gumption to get out there and give it your all, we'll applaud it. But what makes poetry better, what makes a poet grow and change is criticism. It's outside influence, it's outside input, which can be very difficult to get sometimes. And we're gonna dive into poetic forms and everything else, but this is just a little bit that I like to talk about first, because you, and I'm saying the royal you here, as a poet, are not going to get better if you do not allow outside opinions, outside criticism, outside ideas into that poetry. And it's a difficult concept to get, especially for younger poets or newer poets. And I'm not trying to be condescending or anything. It's just something that I've run into over and over and over again. It's really easy to look at a poem that hits the page and you end up with a lot of ownership there. You write the poem out and there's just a ton of this is me, this is mine, this is a piece of my soul put to paper. It's my mind gem right here, right? How dare anybody else say I should have done something different? This is my stuff. How dare you? And it's an easy trap to fall into. It really is. Like I said, I've I've won lots of accolades with my poetry and everything else. I don't write a single poem that doesn't get given to at least two people for criticism, for insight. I've got two people that I utilize myself, and that I'm sure there's others who'd be happy to, but there's two people in particular that I use for my poetry to say, hey, what's going on with this? The reason why I dive into this first is because poetry, if it's going to be done, if it's going to be right, if it's going to be good, poetry's work. And I'm having a hard time. This was discussed before the recording started, in that I have completely misplaced my original notes, which were actually printed out paper notes. So I quickly put this class together from memory in the interwebs. But a concept that I work very hard to get across to new poets when I'm working with them is the idea of the shoddy first draft. And what is a shoddy first draft? A shoddy first draft is anything I've written that I haven't rewritten at least once. And it doesn't matter how proud I am of it. And it doesn't matter how happy I am with it, the way that it looks right now, the way that it works right now. It's a first draft. It's a first draft until you've put in the work, until you've gone over it and worked it until it is what you want. And it's the working of the poetry is really what I want to talk about here. Everyone here knows what a poem is. I don't have to tell anybody what a rhyme is, but what we are going to do is we're going to talk about different kinds of rhythm, different kinds of rhyming, why it is that one piece of poetry just falls off the tongue with a rhythm that's catchy and moving and seems to bring the entire audience forward with the poem, and why another one makes you kind of stumble and fall over your tongue and doesn't seem to work right. But like I said, the first thing I wanted to get across is the idea of the shoddy first draft, is the idea that, no, seriously, I don't care how proud I am of a poem that I write. It's a first draft until it's been rewritten at least once. Until the work's been done, it's a first draft. So basically the bottom line is, if you want to write better poetry, find some better poets and submit your work. Talk to people about what you write. Get outside input on what you write, because that means that there will be some kind of middle game between you're a beginner, you're doing the work, congratulations, everybody applauds, and you've submitted something to an ArtSci event and there's a line of laurels waiting to tell you what you did wrong. There needs to be a happy medium in there somewhere, or people get really, really discouraged. All righty. I feel like I'm falling over myself there, but hopefully I'm getting my point across. When we are talking about poetry, there's so many different kinds of poetry. There's no way I could make this class about, period poetry, because somebody would be here looking for, Norse, Eddas full of alliteration, and other people would be looking for something like Jean Donne or Shakespearean sonnets or whatever. There's so many different forms that poetry can take. So what I want to talk about today is the basic building blocks of poetry, why it is that poetry works. Well, some poetry works, and that some poetry really doesn't. The first thing that I want to talk about is the concept of rhyme versus rhythm. Now, of course, not all poetry is rhyming poetry, but a lot of period poetry is. Stepping away from rhyming poetry, while it's certainly been done throughout history, is more of a modern take on poetry than a period one. So it's one of the first pitfalls, I guess I should say, of a new poet is chasing a rhyme without concern for the rhythm. And here's the simple fact, folks. Rhythm works without rhyme. If you don't believe me, read Shakespeare. There's not a lot of rhymes in there, but the rhythm works. And we're going to talk about what those rhythms are and why they work, but the rhythm works. However, who here has heard a poem where the rhymes get really, really forced, for lack of a better word? You can tell that people said da 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 to rhyme one thing, and then da 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 to get another rhyme in there. That's a concept called chasing the rhyme, which means you're trying to get that rhyming word in there without working on the rhythm of the poetry. There are some meters that almost everybody in the SCA is most likely familiar with. The classic iambic pentameter. We've heard all this, iambic pentameter, iambic pentameter. Anybody who's had any time with Shakespeare knows the iambic pentameter. So what is that Shakespearean iambic pentameter? Well, an iamb is simply a two-syllable phrase. And the way that rhythm works in poetry is there are stressed terms followed by unstressed terms, or in this case, unstressed terms. All right. So the idea is you've got a stress and an unstress. And the rhythm of poetry works with those stresses. When you are crafting a poem, when you're working through a poem, that rhythm is important. Now, don't think for a minute that means, okay, I'm going to do iambic pentameter. What is that? That's 5 iambic feet. What is an iambic foot? An iambic foot is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. Ba 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 ba, right? And you go, okay, well, there it is. Perfect iambic pentameter. That's 5 steps. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. Don't think for a minute, though, that rhythm means you have to have the same stresses every single time. As anybody knows what the next line of that is, it is the east. And Juliet is the sun. It's a completely different set of rhythms. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. And it works, but it's not the same rhythm. So what I want to talk about first is some different rhythmic feet and some examples of those rhythmic feet and how they work. And then I'm going to show you some examples of how they don't work as well. We've already talked about iambic, which is the iamb. It is feet, F-E-E-T. Not feet like a feat of strength. No, it's feet, because they literally talk about it like it's a march. And there's different rhythmic feet, they call them. 2-syllable feet, 3-syllable feet. These are just rhythmic measures in poetry. We talked about the iamb, right? But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. There are others. The opposite of an iamb, okay, is called a trochee, which is a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. And changing the feet that you use completely changes the feel of a poem. An iambic poem feels lyrical and lilting. It's why Shakespeare used it. On the other hand, a trochee, stress, unstress, para, sounds driving. It sounds like it's rolling down a hill. It's not a kind of a lilting lyrical feel at all. Just for fun, because I've got enough people here, can anybody think of a poem that is the opposite, that uses the opposite of an iambic measure, uses a trochaic measure, the bada, 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 as opposed to the bada, bada, bada of an iambic poem? And everybody's like, no, that's what we're here for. But I like to throw things out for for questions if I can. Now, the most common trochaic poem in the world is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. If you know The Raven, you know a trochaic poem. If you've ever heard of The Raven, Ah, distinctly, I remember it was in the bleak December. Bada, 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 bada. Poe loved trochaic rhythm. He uses it in a lot of his poems, but the one that everybody knows about is The Raven, right? Once upon a midnight dreary, while I wandered weak and weary, bada, bada, bada. As I said, just by changing the way that the stresses work on the line, you've completely changed the feel of the poem, right? And even if it was something that was not as kind of dark and dreary as The Raven is, it doesn't matter. The rhythm is going to bring that up anyway. It's like this almost galloping rhythm. There are other two-syllable rhythms that we could wander off into. There's two unstresses, two stresses, but the big ones that most people that I try and get off, because I've only got an hour here, is the iamb and the trochee. The idea behind keeping those rhythms similar or the same throughout a piece. Now, there are 3-syllable feet as well. One of them is like an iamb with an extra unstressed syllable called an anapest. I'll put it into chat here. There we go. Oh, did I put an extra N in there? I probably did. The way that an anapest works is, like I said, it's an iamb with an extra unstressed syllable. So instead of going bara, I have barara, unstress. And the easiest example of an anapestic rhythm is A Visit from St. Nicholas, otherwise known as The Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Ba-da ba 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 ba-da ba. Now, it's usually going to be, like I said before, with the trochee being driving and the iamb kind of being more light and lyrical as a rhythmic device. An anapest is almost always going to seem fairly sing-song. It kind of like Night Before Christmas. Ba-da-da, 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 ba-da-da. There's the opposite of that, which is stress, stress, or stress, unstress, unstress, which is ba-da-da. And that is called a dactyl. I'll try and put that in the chat here. Now, again, this is all stuff you can find. You can look it up off the interwebs. I'll do my best to put the little terms in here. The dactyl is like I said, a stressed syllable, unstressed, unstressed. And probably this one's getting a little bit more esoteric, but one of my favorite dactyl poems or examples of a dactyl poem is Evangeline by Longfellow. And it starts with, "This is the forest primeval, the whispering pines and the hemlocks. This is the forest primeval, the whispering pines and the hemlocks." All right. Excuse me. The last part there isn't actually a dactyl. The last part is a trochee, but that's fairly common. But the whole thing is stress, 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 This is the forest primeval, the whispering pines and the hemlocks. Excuse me. There are rhythmic devices that go together well, and there are rhythmic devices that really don't when you're trying to put together a poem that rhythmically works. For example, trochee and dactyl go together really well because a dactyl is just a trochee with an extra unstressed syllable, trochee being bada and dactyl being badada. So you can tell that you're going to get almost a drum beat Bada 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 da bada da bada 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 da bada da bada bada. You can see that these two rhythmic devices work really pretty well together. Like I said, honestly, it starts sounding like a drum beat when you start putting them together. That nonsense works. On the other hand, it's really difficult to put a trochee into an iambic form. Bada, 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 bada. At that point, you get that thing where most of us have probably heard it before or even experienced it before, where you have a poem that starts to stumble over itself, where the rhythm starts to break. Just in case you're afraid that you might be the only person struggling with some of this, one of my favorite examples to bring up here, let's see if I can find him. I pulled him up here somewhere. There is a lovely gentleman by the name of William McGonagall, who is considered by many to be quite simply the worst poet of all time. And I'm not even kidding. The guy's kind of horrible, or he was anyway. The example I'm going to give you here, I'm going to actually share my screen for just a moment, and I will share this guy. Shared. Is this lovely bit right here? Whoops, come back here. Can everybody see this? Is this sharing properly? All right. This is the way that a lovely poem called The Tay Bridge Disaster from William McGonagall starts. Beautiful railway bridge, railway, marriage is the reason. No, anyway, beautiful railway bridge of the silvery Tay. Alas, I am very sorry to say that 90 lives have been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a very long time. Yeah, I see the laugh. This is a mess rhythmically. And in order to show what I'm talking about by a mess rhythmically, I went ahead and plotted out the rhythm of this work. And this is something that I recommend people learn how to do for their own stuff. This is really, really important. And that is, I have a dash for stresses and commas for unstresses. And so I have beautiful railway bridge of the silvery Tay, right? And so you get stress, unstress, 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 unstress. Now, that line in and of itself, while it's a bit of a mess, it could be worked with if it was not then followed by the next line, which, as you can see, besides ending with unstress, stress is almost completely different. Stress, stress, unstress, unstress, unstress. It has absolutely no relation to the first line. And then this poor last line here, which will be remembered, is basically 4 unstressed syllables. It's not which will be, it's not which will be, it's not which will be, it's which will be remembered for a very long time. It's kind of a mess. It is difficult to define exactly what causes a poem to stumble over itself, to not be rhythmically good, for lack of a better term. It's easy, though, to feel it when it happens. Now, again, am I saying that a poem needs to have the same rhythm all the way throughout? Never. A poem that has the same rhythm all the way throughout is, regardless of what it is going to end up seeming sing-song. There's a word for it in poetry called doggerel. And doggerel is it's sing-song, it's Hallmark card, it's nursery rhyme, it's ba-da-da-da-da-da, 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 right? Super, super simple, end rhyming on every line type of poetry is what they call doggerel. But even if it's got a complex rhyming scheme, if it's the same rhythm on every single line, it's just going to either start sounding sing-song or just kind of plodding, depending on what the rhythmic device is. So not only is it okay to mix up rhythms, it's almost required to not have a poem that's, for lack of a better term, boring. I'm going to stop my share for just a moment here because there's another example I want to bring up, which is the, here we go. It's the one that I just brought up. Let me copy it real quick earlier about Shakespeare. Again, this is that line from Romeo and Juliet, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. The first part of this poem is really easy to look at the poetry of, or the rhythm of, excuse me, because it's simply, but soft, what light through yonder window breaks. It's absolutely perfect iambic pentameter. Each of these unstressed followed by a stress being the iamb, right? And then we come down here to the next bit. It is the east and Juliet is the sun, where we have this this interesting, we don't have to dive into this. Technically, it's called a quartus paean, but it is the trumpet sound. Ba-da-da-da. That's why they call it the paean, which is, let's see here, unstress, unstress. It is the east and Juliet, oops, I missed the, is the sun. So we started with perfect iambic pentameter, and then we went into two quartus paean, which is this da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, and then finally an anapest at the end is the sun. You'll notice that the rhythms are different, but the rhythmic concepts, unstressed followed by stressed, are the same, and it flows. It is the east and Juliet is the sun, is this wonderful break in the ba-da, 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 ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. It works, it flows because it's rhythmic feet that work together using that unstress and stress. Oh, I'm seeing something that Marl said in chat, that sometimes what you want is to put something jarring in there, and that's perfectly okay. If you want to drop a jarring rhythm change into a rhythm for effect, into a poem, I should say, for effect, oh, that's lovely. That's lovely and brilliant when it's done, but that's a little beyond what I'm trying to talk about right now, which is just keeping a consistent rhythm throughout a piece on purpose. The bottom line is this. No one here is going to suddenly be an expert now on poetic rhythm. It takes work. It takes, they call it workshopping a poem, but it's the concept that I said before of that first draft, right? Of taking it and going, okay, here's the story that I want to portray. Here's the idea that I want to put on paper. It's on paper now. Okay, how does it work rhythmically? How can I work it to make the rhythm work better than it does? Utilizing the methodology I showed you before of actually putting out the stressed and actually putting out that methodology of the stressed and unstressed syllables. This concept of checking out the way that things are stressed by literally just writing out the rhythm of it. Treat it like a drum beat. Ba-da, 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 ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da. If it flows, if it works, if you can just ba-da-da-da-da, the rhythm's out as a drum beat and there's a rhythm that flows through it, that same rhythm will flow through your words. That same rhythmic device will work as the poem is being being spoken or read. No worries at all, Esther. I entirely get it. The next thing I want to talk about is actual rhyming. Rhyming is a lot more complex than a lot of people realize. We could dive into the different rhyme structures. The way that people talk about rhymes will usually be, when we're talking about just whether lines rhyme or do not rhyme, they'll talk about it in terms of letters. I feel like I'm not getting this across very well, but we're going to try it this way. Sure. All right. So if we drop this guy off the top of the screen, there we go. If I have a poem and every two lines rhyme, It's what is known as an A B B poem, a lot of times written out as simply AABB. What does this mean? This means this one is going to be bada 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 A, bada 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 A, bada 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 B, bada 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 B, right? However that line is going to rhyme, it's going to be whatever ends this one is going to end this one, whatever ends this one is going to end this one as far as rhyme schemes. And so people will talk about different rhyme schemes. You'll see people with, A, B, A, B, which means the first and third line are going to rhyme. The second and fourth line are going to rhyme. People will, set up all kinds of different poems. A poem that I did at the last Bargamel's, which was, I think I did this, was it the last Bargamel's? It doesn't matter. Was a love poem that I wrote, and it was a little weird as far as the rhyme scheme goes because it was AAAB CCCB, which was the first three lines rhymed with themselves on both of the verses, and then the last line in each verse rhymed as well. And so you can get some really, really weird, complex rhyme schemes going. But what I want to talk about right now is not necessarily just the way, whether or not each line rhymes with the next one. What I want to talk about are some different kinds of rhymes. And there's a lot of different rhymes. The classic, what they call the perfect rhyme, is where the last part of any line is exactly like the next line. Rat rhymes with cat. Love rhymes with dove, right? The issue with perfect rhymes, and it's not really even an issue, it's just something that you can run into with perfect rhymes, is they can get a little cliched after a while. It turns out that unless you are writing about something very, very new, things like love getting rhymed with above or dove or whatever, I getting rhymed with sky, getting rhymed with try, it's happened so often that you can run into basically putting out things that are cliched. I joked when I talked about that love poem that everything I had tried up until that point, trying to write a love poem, had come out sounding like a Hallmark card. And that's kind of what I meant, was it came out, it was classic kind of cliched rhymes in a cliched rhyming scheme that just all ends up coming out sounding like da 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 blah, 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 and it's just not fun. There are different kinds of rhymes. A lot of people are likely familiar with the concept of a slant rhyme. And a slant rhyme really messes with people, especially when they're first starting to work on their poetry, because it feels like cheating. A slant rhyme feels like, okay, you didn't work hard enough to get a real rhyme, so you got something that sounds sort of like it. Cat and fab, do they actually rhyme? Not really, but they're kind of close if you squint just a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, slant rhyme is a perfectly valid literary device, and poets have used it throughout history. One of a poet that became famous for her use of slant rhyme was Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson, this is the poem I was talking about. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches on the soul and rings the tune without the words and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. In this case, we've actually got a true slant rhyme here between soul and all, right? These are not technically rhymes. We've got soul and we've got all, but all it takes is changing your pronunciation a little bit to get soul and all, and it all kind of works together. Technically, feathers and words are also a slant rhyme. Hope is a thing with feathers, a tune without the words. They don't rhyme perfectly, but mentally, when you hear them, there's a rhyme there. Some people, you'll hear this referred to as assonance sometimes, which is similar consonant sounds, which kind of works here, except that soul and all really don't. They have that L at the end, but it works. Soul and all, with feathers, without the words. Because they ring similarly in the ear, they work well in a poem, and that's perfectly okay. Do not fight against a slant rhyme if you've got one that works, right? Don't sit there and try and find, well, I need a word that rhymes with this exactly, or it's not gonna work. Slant rhymes are perfectly valid. When you get into the technicalities, one of the things that makes people look at me kind of funny is when I start talking about the difference between masculine rhymes and feminine rhymes. And this has, nothing to do with, cultural gender roles here. When we talk about a masculine rhyme is a word where it is the entire single word syllable that rhymes. The cat in the hat, right? Cat and hat are the rhyming words. A feminine rhyme is a rhyme where it is the last two syllables or the last two stressed syllables, that make for the rhyme. An example of a feminine would be like rhyming actual and factual, right? It's not just a hard end stop rhyme, it's a number of syllables. It can be a 3-syllable like actual or factual. It can be a 2-syllable like crazy and lazy. But if you've got a rhyme where 2 rhymes work together, it's considered to be a feminine rhyme. Now, why is this important? Because mixing the 2 together can be really jarring. Now, as was mentioned earlier by Marl, if jarring is what you're going for, then that's perfectly okay. But one of the things that can make a rhyme scheme falter is trying to mix a feminine rhyme with masculine rhyme, with a multisyllable rhyme with a hard stop 1-syllable rhyme. Because especially if you've gotten things like lazy and crazy in there, and so people are expecting that 2-syllable feminine rhyme, you end it with, just something talking about the letter Z. Sure, technically Z rhymes with crazy, but Z is that hard stop masculine rhyme and crazy is that 2-syllable feminine rhyme, and they don't really work very well together rhythmically. And it's okay to have rhyme schemes that dive even further than that. Believe it or not, one of my favorite examples of complexity in rhyme schemes these days isn't even coming from classical poetry, it's coming from rap. The things that hip hop artists have been doing with rhythmic devices in their work has been remarkable. And an example that I've got here somewheres, where is it? This is a bit of lyrics from Not Afraid by Eminem. And yeah, there's a lot of colloquialisms in there, I'm a be what I set out to be. And people have a tendency to kind of look down on that, but it's the English language. It's what we're doing with it. And rhythmically, though, what this is, I'm a be what I set out to be, without a doubt, undoubtedly. And all those who look down on me, I'm tearing down your balcony. Now, there's not a single true rhyme in there. There's not a single perfect rhyme in this whole thing. Out to be, undoubtedly, or you could even make it a 4-syllable rhyme, set out to be undoubtedly, but really it's out to be undoubtedly, right? Down on me and balcony. Looking at it as perfect rhymes, they don't make any sense at all. But as slant rhymes, multisyllabic slant rhymes, they work absolutely beautifully. And the rhythm is perfect. What we were talking about before. I'm a be what I set out to be, without a doubt, undoubtedly, and all those who look down on me, I'm tearing down your balcony. The rhythm is absolutely spot on dactyl rhythm. Ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da. all the way through it. And like I said, I don't really have a point here besides the fact that I'm really enjoying what modern hip hop is doing for rhythmic devices. It really is fun. And the idea that you can look into something like modern hip hop and find such a brilliant example of poetic pacing and slant rhyme is just really, really fun to me. Meryl says there's just rhymes everywhere in that one. Lots and lots of out syllables. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's tons of internal rhyme. And internal rhyme is something we haven't even discussed yet. I'm running low on time frame for the class here. Internal rhyme is something we haven't even talked about, which is where you have rhymes inside a line that rhyme with other words inside the next line, or even with inside its own line. And yeah, pull that guy back up again. The internal rhyme structure there. I'm a be what I set out to be, without a doubt, undoubtedly, and all those who look down on me, I'm tearing down your balcony. The ow, 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 ow is all through the line. And as a spoken piece, it simply works. And it doesn't have to be with, the driving beat behind it. Right? It doesn't need the music. I'm a be what I set out to be, without a doubt, undoubtedly, and all those who look down on me, I'm tearing down your balcony. Again, it's very obviously a rap lyric, but at the same time, the rhythm and the rhyme scheme is just brilliance, absolute brilliance. The one thing that my notes did have and that I don't have with me is I was going to give out a little bit of a homework project for people that wanted to practice workshopping. Basically, it was a badly written bit of poetry, and I was going to have people try on their own time to see if they could rephrase it or rework it to make the rhythm work better, and the rhyme scheme work better in the poetry. But I don't have that because I've completely lost my notes. Shh, don't tell anybody. I'm going to go ahead and open up. We've got 13 people. Well, 12, counting me. I guess 11, counting the fact that no, because there's 2 of you there. So we got 13 people here. Does anyone have any questions at this point? I've been sitting here just like spouting off at the mouth here. Does anybody have any questions for me on any of the stuff I've talked about, whether that is rhythmic devices, whether that is rhyming schemes, or whether that is just, how to workshop and work with poetry?
When you're getting ready to workshop your first draft, how do you get past the almost mental block of, okay, these are down on paper now, what do I do with them now? Like, how do you even start with that?
Well, here's the trick. And I'm gonna sort of throw somebody under the bus, but you don't know his name, so it doesn't matter. I have a dear friend in a previous kingdom who is an outstanding storyteller. He writes poetry. And his poetry, the stories, you want somebody to write about like an epic thing that happened at court, right? And just have it be beautifully described and a punchline at the end to really get people. This guy is your man, okay? His storytelling, his pacing are brilliant. And I'm not being mean because I'm trying not to be. Because like I said, his storytelling, his pacing, the way he puts a story together and brings you along with it is remarkable. Better than me by far. But every single poem is what they call a rhymed couplet, which is A, B, B, A, B, B. La da 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 blah. La da 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 blah. La da 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 blay. La da 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 blay. Every single poem. So when I first write a poem, number one, usually when I write a poem, and this is going to be different for everybody. It starts as a concept, as a line, right? I will think of something. I'll think of a line. I'll think of a concept. I'll have something in my mind. We're going, oh, I kind of like that structure. what can I build around that structure? And so I'll start working with the concepts and ideas to try and build it out. Once it's on paper, the next thing that I do, and this is going to be weird, but it's the truth, I record myself saying the poem. And this can be rough for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't like the sound of their own voice. But he's like, no, me. I record myself saying the poem. Does it sound good? Right? Can I make it sound better? I will go in and I will do those little tick marks that I was showing before, right? Looking at the stresses, right? Rhythmically, how is this working? Does it work? Is there a better way that I can do this? And even if I'm not sure if there is, I'll try, right? I'll look at a verse and go, okay, this verse is sort of saying what I want this verse to say, but if I was to write a completely different verse to say this, how could I structure this differently? Literally, if I wanted to take what's on this line and present that idea on this line, would it work better? How can I work in there? It's not easy, is the bottom line. And if you've never done it before, you're right. It is kind of a mental block. It can be hard to dig into that, which is why I stressed at the very beginning of class, and I know some people were here, some people weren't, so I'll go back over it. I stressed at the very beginning of class that when you write it down for the first time, it's a shoddy first draft, no matter how proud of it you are. And that's the way, it's a mental game as much as anything else. It's the way I have to think about my poetry, because I'll put it down, and just to get the poetry written out, you better believe I've been working it the whole time, right? I like rhythmic play, and I like funky rhyme schemes, and I will set myself a challenge. Like, I'm going to write a poem that is going to be, right, exactly this many syllables, where the end syllable here is going to be the beginning syllable of the next line. It's got to work rhythmically, and it's got to get this idea out, right? And I'll sit there and just pound myself trying to get that all to work. So by the time I've got it and it works, it's already had a lot of work put into it. And so it's really tempting to then sit and go, okay, there it is, it's done. But I have to remind myself, no, it's not done. This is a shoddy first draft. Can I make it better? Let's speak the poem. Does it work? Do the rhythms flow? Is there a way I can rephrase this to give myself a fun internal rhyme, right? And I hope I'm answering your question. I will go through, I will speak it out, and I'll record myself speaking it out. So, because when you're doing it in the heat of it, right? When you're sitting there reading it, you'll get done with reading it, you'll go, yeah, that sounded great. And then you'll listen to yourself reading it, and you'll go, no, actually, that totally doesn't work. I made that work because I sped those two words up really fast to make it work in the rhythm, and so it kind of worked. But no, if somebody else was reading this, they wouldn't know to do that, and it would sound horrible. Another thing is, if you have somebody else in your household whom you trust, have them read it to you, because a make or break point of a poem is not, can I read it and have it sound good? It's if I give it to someone else and they read it, does it sound good? Because you'll know, okay, I'm going to slow this word down and speed these two syllables up because they're kind of taking the place of one syllable. So I'm going to say maybe where somebody else would say may. And so you kind of have it down in your head how you're going to speak that poem out, but you give it to somebody else, and suddenly where you were going to put one beat on maybe, they say may be blah, right? And they've suddenly put two beats on it, and the rhythm's completely thrown out, right? So that's another step that you can take, is give it to somebody else and listen to the way that they speak it back to you. Does it flow when somebody else says it? If you are worried about the rhythm, then the little tick marks that I showed you before, something cute just walked in front of the camera. I have a 7-year-old staying with me right now. I'm actually surprised we have not had 7-year-old interruptions during this process. Um, what was I talking about? Oh, there she is. What was I talking about? Oh, setting up rhythm, doing the little tick marks like I was showing before to try and pace out the rhythm to see if it works. I hope these are ideas that are helping. And whether any of these actually help you get past a mental block, I don't know. What gets me past the mental block is, like I said, it's the idea of the SFD, is keeping in mind that once it's on paper, it's an SFD, that it's subject to change. I go back and change poems that I wrote years ago. Just words. I'll read through a poem that I wrote years and years and years ago. I've got a poem that I consider to be rhythmically one of the best poems I've ever written, but it's still within the last year I've made changes to it, and I wrote it back in 2007 or 8. And I've gone and looked over that poem again and gone, you know what? I think I can tweak this here. Yeah, I like that even better. So, of course, at some point you got to consider a poem done, but even the poems that are quote unquote done, I'll recite them years after I've created them and go, I actually don't like that bit. Let's change that. Let's rewrite that. Okay, now it's better. I don't think I have any poems that have stopped changing at least a little bit over time. I don't know if that helps. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, I think it does.
Awesome. It was a great question. Does anybody else have any questions?
Will you judge me super harshly if I perform doggerel if it's really funny?
Oh gosh, no. Oh, believe me, there is a time and a place for everything, including doggerel.
I think the point is to do it on purpose or with a purpose.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's just it please don't, when I talk about doggerel, it has this negative connotation, right? If it's not intended. If you're making something that's supposed to be sing-songy and silly and kind of lead you down a garden path and give you a gotcha at the end, yeah, no, there's nothing in the world wrong with that. If that's the device that you're using, you use it like a device. Oh yeah, no, there's, and that's the thing is, who was it before? It was Marl, I think, that was talking about interrupting a rhythmic structure. I wish I could think of one right off the bat, something that would be well known to people where they went in and just utterly interrupted the rhythmic structure with something to kind of knock you on your feet rhythmically when you're reading the poem. And I can't think of one right now, but it's certainly done where you've got just a rolling rhythm to it, whether it's a trochaic or iambic or whatever. You've just got a regular rolling rhythm to the piece. And then at a certain point, they just completely interrupt, put in like 4 stressed syllables in a row or something like that to just completely disrupt the poem. Entirely fine. The idea behind what I'm saying here, hopefully none of what I'm saying here has been never do this. What I'm saying here is be aware of the of the devices, be aware of what it is you want the poem to do. And if you want a silly kind of nursery rhyme sing song, we're going to take you very liltingly and easily down a little garden path because I've got a gotcha punchline at the end. Yeah, that's brilliant. There's not a thing in the world wrong with that. On the other hand, if you're trying to write the eulogy for somebody who passed away last week, you probably don't want to use the same rhythmic device.
Are you sure?
Okay, maybe.
It might depend on who they were.
You know, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
No, I really appreciate that actually, because I did the whole high school poetry thing, and we never actually went through the breaking down of the stressed and unstressed syllables. So now I'm looking at my own poetry and going,
Yep.
Maybe I should, yeah. It's a good thing I specialize in filks primarily now.
And that's the beautiful thing about filks is there's already a rhythmic structure there, right? And you're actually taking and making other words fit into the same rhythmic structure. And the cool thing about a filk as somebody who's, especially somebody who's just getting into poetry, is it does give you that framework, and it becomes really easy to tell. I'm glad you brought filks up. It becomes really easy to tell if something rhythmically works within a filk or if it doesn't, right? Because the filk has a specific rhythm that it's going to the music. And if you try and throw 4 syllables into some place that's only supposed to have 2, it's gonna be really obvious, right? Or if you end something on a down stress where the original song ends it on an up stress, it's gonna sound weird, right? So a filk is actually really good at kind of forcing you to work within that rhythmic structure. Yeah, I like filks. I'm not really that versed in them. I haven't done a lot of filks. I mean, everybody makes up silly songs to existing tunes. But as far as like, here's something that I would perform, I don't have a lot of them. I don't write much in the way of music at all. I've written lots of poetry in the SCA. I've written exactly 2 songs. And yes, Apples on the Road was the second song I've ever written in the SCA.
That's a good one. Excellent.
No problem.
Because people should be aware that if I do poetry, it's not going to be, it's going to be doggerel and filks and yeah.
And again, I hope nobody at this point is feeling like they should be looked down on if they don't have massively complex rhyme schemes and structures. You don't. If you enjoy that, if that's a kind of work that you enjoy, I enjoy it. I like the artistry of it.
Well, I was going to say, it's a good reminder to actually look at the structure of what we're doing, which is something that I'm not necessarily good at.
Yeah.
Yes, Rick. I see. We got the you do that voodoo so well. Yeah.
That voodoo that you do. Yeah, and again, it doesn't have to be something super complex. I mean, I've written like really, really simple stuff, and I've written really complex stuff. I enjoy the complex stuff, but the simple poems, if they're well crafted, if they work rhythmically and they're fun to say, they're fun to read, and I don't mean funny, although they can be, but they're just enjoyable. They kind of trip off the tongue. The rhythm works, and it's fun to speak them out. It feels like a drum riff to say the poem, even if it's a simple poem, even if it's just simple rhymed couplets. That's just fun. It's fun. It really, really is. Phenomenal questions. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up filks, because it really is, if you're not used to working rhythmically, filking's awesome because the rhythm's there for you, and you kind of have to fit what you're going to put in there into the rhythm and rhyme structure that the original song had. And it forces you to workshop. It forces you to take, well, this is what I want to make this about. How do I make the words fit? How do I make the rhythm fit? How do I make it so that when I'm singing this, absolutely everybody knows where I'm going next with this, because we all know the song, right? And in order to do that, you got to get the rhythm right. You got to get the stresses, the rhythm, the rhyme scheme. It's got to work. So yeah, filking can be a great way to practice basically everything I've been talking about. All hail Weird Al Yankovic. You are not even kidding. Well, call him a parody artist. We all know he's the master of filk. It's what he does.
Well, I know that we definitely appreciate the time that you've taken to go over it with us, and it is a good reminder that feedback and criticism are not always bad things to get.
Yeah.
Because sometimes another eye helps us. Another eye sees things that we would not otherwise see.
It's funny because, like I said, I do a lot of poetry, and I have a certain conceit that I'm decent at it. I've got 2 people, one of whom actually has a PhD in poetry, dear friend of mine, and another of whom is just a very, very good amateur poet. I will submit poems to them, and I will do everything they tell me to do to that poem. And that is, it's tough because it feels like you're like, suddenly it's not mine anymore, right? I've let somebody else into my little piece of art. I've come out with a better poem every single time. And I just make it a mental thing. When I get stuff back from them, I do what they say. And sometimes I will keep the result and sometimes I will change the result, but I will always, whatever they say needs to be changed, needs to be worked, needs to be adjusted, a different way of phrasing, anything that comes back. And my friend Meredith, who is the one, she can be vicious with a red pen. And I'm telling you, every time I will at least try everything she tells me to do. And I end up with a better poem every single time.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing to keep in mind.
Yep.
And that is one nice thing about the society where it is now is the criticism we get is more constructive than probably any time past.
Yep.
So we're very big on building people.
You're right. I think things are changing as far as, constructive criticism or anything else. I've been playing in the SCA since 1992, which I know still makes me a baby for some people, I'm sure. Especially early on, you get people that were, I'm a poet in the SCA, and 8 years later, their poems sound exactly like they did 8 years ago. There's literally been no change. There's been no growth. There's been no need, because the first poem got laughter and applause, so the next poem does, and then the next poem does, and then the next poem does, and then you're a decade into this and you haven't actually grown or changed as a poet, which is okay if you're not looking to grow or change as a poet. Or if you're looking to hone it as an art form, it really is important to get that outside criticism.
Mentioned early on in the conversation was trying to find that middle ground between, oh, cool, there's a good start here, there's promise in this person, they've got good performing skills or whatever, versus trying, having laurels out the door. I can't seem to find that middle ground of finding the level of critique that I need to help me grow. All I get is, well, you need to improve. Okay, so how?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
I think now with laurels, instead of them giving you their unabashed opinion on what you're doing, they wait until you ask them to give critiques, and then they give you the critiques.
Right, and I've asked a handful of people on feedback from different things, for different performances at different events and whatnot, and largely I just get, well, you need to improve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I get that.
Originally, I wasn't trying to down on laurels in any way. I was just saying that there's a big gap between I'm a beginner doing poetry. Here I am. I got the guts to get out here and perform. Everybody claps. Woohoo! That was awesome. And then there's this huge gap from that to I'm submitting something to an art site competition and I've got 20 laurels telling me I suck.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just Bardic either. I've seen this gap in a lot of different aspects of the SCA, where they applaud you when you're starting because there's promise and you're willing to put yourself forth and do this stuff, but you almost lose your footing as you get better before you get to really good, because you can't seem to find what it is you need to do to improve.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have the education. Like, I don't have very much musical education background at all. Like, if you throw musical concepts at me, I'm going to blank out. No idea what you're talking about.
I'll be honest, me too.
Well, and I would suggest that maybe, I don't know if you have or not, be really upfront with the level of critiquing that you are able to take. I know that I have learned, if people ask me to review writing, I ask them, okay, are you just looking for me to tell you if it makes sense, and that you're not making an idiot of yourself in this sentence? Or are you asking me for an honest to goodness, hard proofread, editor review kind of a thing? Because I've offended a couple of people because I didn't ask that question.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad you're bringing this up, because it's a really loaded question. When I have somebody, doesn't happen in this kingdom as much just because I haven't been here and been around as much, but in like Trimaris, people who know me and know I do poetry, they'll come up, they'll say, hey, what do you think of this poem? how much of my thinking do you want?
Right. And it's definitely, as someone who has experience in things, so like music is, I have a minor in music performance.
Gotcha.
You know, I've been doing music since I was in the 5th grade. So it's a skill set that I have. But I also, like, I'm in the business, not just in the SCA, but generally, like, I'm not in the business of tearing people down.
Sure.
I'm, you know, if you are truly passionate about something, I do not want you to make make anyone feel like a lesser person. And so, yeah, so I would say when you're asking for feedback, it helps if you tell the person, especially if it's someone who has a lot of experience in that field. It helps a lot if you say, I really would like to have a pointed conversation about what you think of my performance. What I know that I can improve, but I need to know what exactly, because and it could be
asking for more concrete steps.
Yeah.
I think this is part of developing a good relationship with the people that you want to retreat.
Mm-hmm.
That's also another aspect that I struggle with.
We can talk later.
We can talk later.
I don't want to take over the whole
direct
conversation here.
Yeah, it is hard though. I mean, it is hard to get negative feedback, and so you really need to be prepared if you're going to ask for honest to goodness feedback on anything. Be prepared for the fact that it could be kind of harsh.
Yep.
And it's a hard thing to do. Sometimes in our lives we're in a place where we can easily accept and synthesize that kind of heavy critiquing. And other times in our lives, it's best for us to not get kicked down.
It really is difficult when it's an art form. If I'm a teacher, I teach people how to be geeks for a living. And if somebody isn't doing something right on a computer, nobody gets offended if I tell them, you're not doing it right. Here's how you do it right. Right? It's my job. It's a skill they're learning. The problem is with something like poetry, people don't treat it like a skill. People treat it as, this is my art. This is my self-expression. This is my, like I said, this is this little piece of my soul put to paper. And they don't think of it as, no, this is an art. This is a skill I'm perfecting, right? Like becoming a better painter or a better drawer or a better seamstress or tailor or whatever. It's a skill that you're perfecting. And so really, before you start any of this, that's got to be your mindset, is not, this is my beautiful piece of art, my mind
it can
gem.
hurt to get criticism on other art forms too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this whole conversation is really applicable to a lot of the different art forms that we've practiced.
Sure. Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm not claiming to be alone here. It's like, that's why the example was, teaching computers. Nobody gets offended if they don't know something or if they need instruction on how to learn to use a computer better. But how to use language better to get across an idea in a piece of poetry is every bit as much a skill as using a computer better, right? It's something that needs to be practiced and worked and learned as much as anything else. And that's the biggest thing, is if you want to be a better poet, you need to have that mindset that your poetry is a skill as much as an art, and the skill needs to be learned. It needs to be practiced, and there needs to be people who can give you insight on that skill. Mm-hmm. If there isn't, you're simply not going to get better.
Yeah. And I understand what Zuleika is saying as well. It can be difficult, especially if you haven't, like Clovis was saying, established that strong rapport with anyone. Yep. To ask for that kind of feedback. And I guess maybe that's a good reminder for the rest of us that, we should be willing to form those kind of relationships as well.
Yep.
For people. Sorry. Oh, sorry. My mushrooms are cooking.
Yeah. My wife has a lovely, summer squash soup going on right now that the smell has just been permeating the room. All right. Well, folks, thank you so very, very much for your attendance and your very, very good questions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for teaching. And we really do appreciate it.
Not a problem at all. Thank you so much for having me. And if you are not my friend on Facebook, feel free to become so. It's Braennan, spelled just like my name. I'm the only one on Facebook. And if you have questions that you wanted to ask me offline outside of class, that's perfectly cool too. I'd love to work with people. So besides that, I think we're done. Thank you so much.